Hello, everybody, and welcome to Adobe Live. My name is Flynn. I'm here with the fantastic Jeremy Lord, and we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we meet today and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We're both from Sydney, so we're both in Gadigal country. How about we kick in some music as I ask Jeremy, how you going?
I am very well, thank you, Flynn. It's been not that long, actually, since we were last on. How you been?
I haven't been on with you for a while, I think. So the last two streams
Yeah,
you did, we get to hang out before and at the end of the streams, which is always lots of fun. The last two streams you've done with us have been like dual drawing sessions. I did one with Dale Bagini and Jez Rye, the mural guy.
yep,
That's just how I remember to say it, Jez Rye instead of Jez
yeah.
Rye. So
It's like rye bread.
yeah, rye bread. That's right. Said that on the stream, and I was like, yeah, I need to come up with my own like mnemonic device. They were super fun. I was sitting back here pressing buttons and doing dials and stuff like that. But it's been a while since we've been hanging out together, so I am
Yeah,
looking forward to today.
same, man. That should be fun.
So welcome everybody. We are at be.net/live. You can tell it's been a week since I've done this. be.net/live if you want to join the chat. For some reason, I can't log into the chat at the moment. So, verbal hello. But if I was in chat, I would also type hello. But it's great to see you. I can see Festus in the chat, Johanna as well. For those watching, log on in, say hello. And we'll have plenty of time for questions today. So we have a bit of a longer slot, so we can go a bit over an hour. We'll see how we go. We'll just hang out. And see where the flow takes us today. If you're on YouTube, jump over to Behance to say hello. But yeah, what we thought we would do today is continue our kind of look at this Adobe Your World, Your Canvas competition that's happening right now. And Jeremy has kindly volunteered to jump in and show you his like approach to a brief like this. It's a competition. It's pretty loose kind of brief. But let's check that out. I'm dealing with lots of screens today, you guys, so bear with me. This is the landing page. The fantastic Johanna will share a link to that. There's also a link down in the description, the episode description here on Behance and also on YouTube. So if you're watching this on replay and the competition is still happening, check it out. Do enter. It's super easy to enter. I'm going to show you right now. Where's my mouse? Come over here. So yeah, Your World, Your Canvas. This is one entry by Jappy Agancillo, who we also had on the live stream recently. So he was on last week and he showed us his approach, how he did it. So you can check that out, bookmark that for later, watch the live show today. And Janelle Barone did this one as well. Yeah, you guys can see that. Yeah, cool. And then there's this awesome one by Ziva as well. And I was looking at this and I was wondering, I wonder if she added this to the train or if that's just part of the train and like a nice happy accident of contrast with those colors there. But yeah, anyone can download this canvas. So download the canvas, super simple. Grab your favorite Carl T. Webster brush and or True Grit textures and jump in and have a go. And you can download canvases from all around Asia Pacific kind of region. And I'm just going to show you how easy it is to enter. You can literally do whatever you want on these canvases. Maybe a style you haven't done before, or maybe something you're super comfortable with because you want some cash. Because $5,000 US is going to the winner of this comp, which is ending soon. You also get a Creative Cloud subscription. You have your work shared on adobe.com. And Adobe's social media handle, so you can feed the beast and get a few more followers, a few more eyeballs on your work. Check out the details. It is open to people in the Asia Pacific region, specifically these countries. But if you're outside of those countries, you can still have a go and use the hashtag and enter in because there are some really fantastic submissions here. This is Jappy's one that he did on the live stream. Super cool, lots of fun, and we learn a lot. So that was a really fun time, and you can check it out. There's some more submissions since we did this last week. Yeah, check out the hashtag Your World, Your Canvas. It's just up the top there, and have a look for yourself. And that's me done. Now I'm just going to kick back and watch Jeremy work.
That's a solid prize, man. A year's subscription and 500 US, 5,000 US.
5,000 US.
5,000 US, yeah.
Right? That's a lot of bones. So
Yep.
definitely worth it. Like spend a couple of hours and have a bit of fun and enter it in because someone's going to win it. So don't you want $5,000? I want $5,000. I think I'm ineligible. due to working so much with Adobe and having no talent. So, but you are talented. So we've got your screen here. Which of the canvases did you decide on?
So based in Sydney, so I thought I would do this canvas here, just a train going across into Sydney Central Station. So yeah, I was maybe tossing up doing the Hong Kong one just because of that kind of Asian vibes in my work. But yeah, there's something kind of cool about like bombing a train like this and just kind of doing graffiti on the train. And there's maybe a bit of a sense of motion here happening as well. So there's something that can happen in this image that might be a little bit more interesting, that might not be so kind of static as doing just like a flat billboard. Yeah. So yeah, I think I'll probably just do something with this. I have, full disclosure, I have prepared something earlier, which I won't show you yet. That's more just kind of if we're running out of time. But yeah, I'll try and sort of work something kind of manga-y here and see how we go with this. There's something really cool about this, which is this idea that you're doing something on like photo canvas, like you're trying to blend. It's kind of like, like Who Framed Roger Rabbit kind of vibe, where you're putting cartoons on live action shots.
Yeah.
Something that I always kind of go like, hey, I should do this. I should try and see like how I can put like manga characters into photographs, and like I should go around and do a photo safari and like take a bunch of shots and see if I can put stuff onto there. And I never do. So this is a really good kind of.
It's always good to have an excuse, right? Like it's really hard to think, what am I going to do tomorrow? Like what am I going to do that's a little bit different? That's why I think competitions are really cool, whether they're like through Adobe or like anybody else. Like, and you see them a lot on Instagram, right? Like someone will be like, draw this in your style kind of thing. I've seen that quite a lot lately. I think actually Jappy did one recently, which might have been where I saw it last, or is it the 360 days of type? That's a bit intense for me.
Yeah, that's a solid one. Yeah, for sure. It's a commitment.
But people definitely do that. I think it's really cool because it really does force yourself to like tackle it like it's a bit of a brief, like it's loose, but it still gives you some parameters, which I think creatives need.
Yeah, 100%. And it's nice also to like nice little homage to, if you have an artist that you really like and they do draw this in your own style kind of thing, it's always kind of cool to have a look and see how you would do their work but in your kind of style.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that today I'll try and use the features of the train and like change this train into like some kind of monster or beast or something. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but there's something kind of cool about like we've got like eyes here, right? And like 4 eyes, and then there's a big kind of mouth where like teeth can happen in here and whatever, and like maybe like have like something coming out, and it's just like going definitely like motion going this way, something like running into the station a little bit. So we'll probably do something like this and kind of see how that all kind of happens. But it's just starting out with a bit of that kind of manga eyeball happening. And so I usually just kind of sketch up pretty loosely like this. I use a lot of Carl's brushes as well, and we'll probably take a look at those a little bit later on. But when I'm sketching, I just generally like to use something that has a bit of that kind of opacity range. Sorry, get that out of the way. So I've got a bit of flexibility there, and also a bit of a tapered edge if I'm not pressing down as hard. So I'm using a Wacom here. I'm using a Train tablet, as any good digital illustrator probably should, simply because if you don't, you're kind of missing out on a whole range of different features that programs like Photoshop will offer you. So always a good idea to invest into one of those if you can.
And I noticed something interesting. So you created a white layer and then brought the opacity down to like 50% or something like that. Why did you do that?
So basically, otherwise I'm kind of drawing straight onto this thing. So it makes my drawing a little bit harder to see what I'm doing. So that just means that it's just like a see-through kind of sheet of paper behind that. and I can see my drawing a bit more. So then when I'm done with the sketch, I can get rid of that. But it just means that I can see my work a little bit more easily than if it was just the drawing straight onto the image.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool. And dumb question, but it does come up quite a bit. So I shouldn't call it a dumb question. But that super long straight line, can you just remind us how you do like a perfect straight line like that?
Oh yeah. So that's just, you hold down Shift.
Yeah.
So holding down Shift as you draw, you will be able to do horizontal or vertical, depending on which way you're going.
Nice.
If you want to do diagonals, you're going to have to use, it's one of the things with pressure sensitivity, because it will react that way. You can see that what it's done here is it's kind of gone from the thinnest and the lightest all the way down to something a little bit different. So you still get a straight line, but it's usually better to do that with the mouse. If you click, hold down Shift, and then click somewhere else, it'll snap a straight line between the 2 points that you've done. So yeah, so just to hold it down straight, I just do that. And the photo's pretty straight up, so it's all good.
That's cool. Just going to check in with chat real quick. Got Alex Mills in the chat. What's up, Alex?
Hello.
Great to see you there. Festus is saying that's like 20K in New Zealand dollars. Yeah. It's a lot of bones.
I'm going to do a little bit of a cheat here because I've got a bit of symmetry going on. So I'm just going to duplicate that, flip it over, and then that's all good. If I'm like, this is because this is at the sketch phase, so I can afford to do this kind of stuff just to save time, because what I'm trying to do here is get to the concept as fast as possible, and get to like a place where I can actually work this a little bit better as fast as possible. So I'm literally just moving stuff around. When it comes time to like actually ink this up, finally, that'll be drawn in and of itself. Although I do sometimes use the Symmetry Tool as well, which we've spoken about a few times on the stream. Symmetry Tool can be always good fun to use as well. Symmetry
Tool is your friend. You were talking before about the train moving like from right to left, and I noticed that immediately. Yeah, so you've got the eyes looking in that direction, like it's part of the train, which is really cool.
Yep, and then we'll do like, I'm going to put his mouth here. I am not going to give him a nose. I'm not even sure it's a him. It's probably an it, really. And to give it some teeth. So again, there's something like, this idea of manga is a bit of a loose one. I think if you say manga or anime to most people, and probably rightfully so, their brains will immediately jump to something kind of like Japanese, because it is a Japanese thing. But traditionally, manga is just a comic strip, and it's not actually even that to a certain degree. Like if you look at some of like Hokusai's work, it's the guy who did the super famous wave, the Kanazawa wave. So that's Hokusai. He actually did a whole bunch of manga as well, and what's known as manga. So they're not like, there doesn't have to be an actual, like comic strip with lots of like cheesy things happening and superheroes and all that kind of stuff. So the idea here is just for me to do something where there's a bit of motion, and I can kind of work with that style that I like to work with. But beyond that, there's a bunch of interpretations, and it can get quite loose as to like which way I go with stuff. So yeah.
That's cool. I'm just trying to get into chat. That's why I was quiet for a second. I know what I did. It was me being silly, Jeremy.
What was the issue?
I was trying to log in with like my personal login details instead of my enterprise Adobe details.
That'll do it.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah. So so again, like giving this idea of like motion and stuff, like this tongue, kind of long, super long tongue sticking out, can be kind of give us that sense that like there's motion happening this way. And then we can be a little bit gross and kind of add some drool on his tongue kind of coming off and flying off, because why not? That's what we're doing today. So
Nice. That's
again,
cool.
these are pretty rough at this stage, so like I'm not too worried about getting these to look absolutely right. Yeah, just getting some kind of loose ideas in here. We need some things happening up here. Go for the old demon horns.
Nice.
And then we'll add some things happening here. So for instance, now like a little bit later on, I can start to add some of those manga effects, like these kind of motion lines, to really give it that sense of like, movement, these little kind of effects that a lot of anime and manga uses. But also I can just kind of stick some smoke in here, so it's maybe going that fast that it's just kind of screeching along and all this smoke's coming off the tracks.
Nice.
And maybe also down below here. So this is also a thing of like trying to get, when you're doing something like this, my take on it is always try and blend the two things together, try and get the image and the illustration not to just kind of just sit on top of the image, to actually be like blended into the image. So for instance, like I won't do this on this one, but it might be something like, let's say I'll do something like this, right? So those flagpoles there, the tongue will go behind it. So one of them is in front and the others are behind. So that just kind of means that you get that sense of like there's interaction in between the background and the illustration. Same thing here. So this smoke is behind that ledge, but then it's kind of pouring over the ledge and kind of going over the edge here. That always just kind of means that there's a little bit more, like that illustration is now embedded into the actual image that it's sitting on. Just makes things always a lot more interesting, I think.
Yeah, that's cool. For that, I'm sure we'll get to that a little bit later, but as like a bit of a preview, would you use like clipping masks for that kind of thing? Or would you or do you like erase it out, or
So I will draw it in a way that kind of makes a little bit more sense to that. But yeah, clipping masks can be definitely a thing. I'd also do things like this. We'll get to this a little bit later, but there'll be like, in order to give it a bit more of an interaction down here, I'd probably put like a bit of a gradient shadow on there, so the tongue is kind of blocking out the light. So again, just feels like it's kind of interacting a little bit more with all this kind of stuff.
Nice.
And then because if you've got a monster train kind of screeching into the station, probably not happy days. So then that's when I'd kind of start thinking about like, what can I put in the background a little bit? So maybe I'll just kind of set the central tower clock on fire or something. So there's a bit of apocalypse kind of happening here.
It's like being taken over by monsters.
Yeah. And that just makes it a bit more fun and interesting. I might not be able to finish all of this in color and detail in the 2 hours that we've got, but I will finish this up and show you guys when it's all done. But yeah, little things like interactions of things happening on the buildings and stuff like that. It's always kind of super fun to do.
Nice. That's super cool. Just checking in with chat. Nicola in chat said, been following your work for a bit. Jeremy, love your work. Your color play is amazing. I agree.
Thank you very much. Color is, we'll get to color in a little while as soon as the inking's done, but color is something that I spend a fair bit of time on. And it's interesting, actually. I've had a few briefs come in lately where it's been more about like, we only want like 2 or 3 colors.
Really?
Yeah. And at first I was just kind of like, oh man, that's like, can I do that? Like, is that something that I'm capable of doing? Because it's always like, we speak about this sometimes when we're on with like Dale, for instance, who like works a lot in black and white. This idea of like black and white versus color, like, yeah, choosing all your colors is pretty challenging, and can take a fair bit of time, but because you've got like, it's essentially you're adding more words to your vocabulary. You can say more things more easily, whereas when all you're using is like 2 words and they're always the same words, that can seriously cause some issues if you're trying to kind of say something visually and all you've got is those colors. Like it makes it quite difficult for things to stand out if you want. So I think that working in black and white is harder than working in color.
Yep. I can see that. I like that idea that it's like a little bit like a vocabulary. I quite like that. And I'm stunned that you didn't make a food analogy.
Oh, what am I thinking?
It's like cooking in the kitchen and you've only got 1 pan. I mean, you can do it, but you know.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, it's exactly that. It's like trying to make 1 billion dishes with 2 ingredients.
It's like having 1 cooktop.
Thanks for bringing me back into the fold.
No worries. Strayed a little bit there.
It's my own fold, man. Like, what am I thinking? Yeah, so let's make this like a bit more comic. This is probably the last thing I'll do before I start inking this up a little bit. We'll add in some kind of manga special effects. And so, yeah, this is one of those funny things. I don't know if there's like many kind of anime and manga fans out there, but you'll generally see in if you're reading like a translated version of like, I don't know, let's say like Akira or something, my personal favorite. If you read a version that is in English, obviously because these sound effects when like, you know, somebody punches someone or when a car like screeches to a halt or whatever, the artist does what I'm doing now and like literally draws that into the image. So the speech bubbles that the people are kind of talking about are modulable, and you can kind of edit those and add the text in that you want to add in, and they're kind of designed that way. But the special effects are part of the drawing, so you can't really do anything about that. And so what happens is you get like these kind of big things that occur into the edge of your drawing, and sometimes they, like, obviously if you don't read Japanese you won't know what it's saying, but so they have a glossary at the back of these kind of things often. Really? Where it says like page 3 says this, it means this. So the funny thing about this kind of stuff is that these special effects, they're not what you would think, right? So like something like BAM or like smack or whatever will not be written as smack in Japanese. It'll be written as like something else entirely different. So even if you like, so like this for instance says like pee, right? And that's like, that is literally the sound. If you look it up, there's a bunch of websites for this actually that tells you like what sound effects you should write if you're trying to do the sound in Japanese. Wow. Okay. So yeah, that literally means like when something is screeching, it makes this sound, but it's not like, that's not the sound.
That's not the sound. Okay.
Yeah, but it's just one of those little things. It's a bit of a nerdy thing for me to kind of add in there of just like, let's make it authentic and let's make it like confusing for people. And doing that obviously immediately kind of makes it a little bit more kind of manga vibes. I put this on a separate layer, mostly because as you guys can see, like it's good to be able to kind of control it and put it in places where it's not kind of competing with the illustration too much, but it's still kind of semi-legible. Yeah, so that's pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with that right now. As you can see, it's actually like the little explosion that I put on the building there is now going to be completely blocked out. Oh well, that's the name of the game. You got to kind of learn to murder your darlings a little bit and, you know, not be too wedded to what you did and how it's kind of all looking. At the end of the day, the important thing is that the image looks good as a whole. So yeah, so that's basically it. So the image that I had to begin with was something like this. Oh, and I forgot my little annoyed symbol, the little anime veins kind of popping on the head symbol thing where you see this always happen when somebody's like
Oh
exasperated
yeah,
or annoyed.
yeah, I know.
This
Yeah.
little thing, and it comes from drawing like veins on a forehead, kind of like popping out. So it's just kind of gone into that. Sometimes you see it with
It's
forehead.
just become like quite exaggerated now, right? Like it's just part
Yeah,
of the
it's a lot more like
vernacular.
graphic, and it's like the little thing where like somebody's annoyed. Often in cartoons you'll see something like this, or like when somebody swears you'll just see like, you know, something like that, and it's like obviously you don't want to write the swear word down. So things like that are just all part of those like little cues that will let people know that this is like, oh yeah, cool, I get it. I'm getting the manga flavor there. There you go. There's your food analogy.
Flavor. Yeah. You remind me a lot when you're talking about the sounds, like about like, because I read Marvel comics. I don't read manga, but I read a lot of the Marvel comics. And like, you know, Wolverine will have like, it's like, I don't even know how to say it, but it's like shink, like
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, like, or like schlick, or like,
yeah, but it's become almost like an in joke. Like, like, you know, they'll even say it verbally. Well, obviously it's written. Like, you know, what are you gonna like skink me or something like that? But yeah, I've seen that like within the artwork, like as like cutting through something, like one of the many Wolverine characters that exist now will like slice through, and it'll be part of the slice or something like that. Or like just after they've sliced something, you'll see it as, you know, it's tearing off from the fabric or something like that. It's like such an interesting, like I think I appreciate it a lot more from like seeing illustrators like such as yourself on here and going, oh wow, that's like actually really cool. They do it with Hulk a lot as well. Like if Hulk will like jump and land on something, like within the rocks that are flying up, it'll be like smash or something like that. It's really cool.
So now I'm just like inking this up, right? So I put my two sketch layers in a group together, and then I can drop the opacity of that group down. Often what you'll see as well is I'll do something like this where I'll use blue instead of black. Just there's no real particular reason why one versus the other, but often you'll see just kind of this. It just means that it's a slightly different color to my black outline that I'm going to put onto it. Yeah, we've spoken about this a bunch of times where it's like it's an animator's thing as well, but I will actually leave it pink now, just
why not?
Because it kind of looks cool.
Go with pink.
I think pink is my favorite color. Don't you know?
Really?
Yeah. Neon,
I like yellow.
Pink. Yeah, look at my face, man. It's pink.
Well, I'm like incredibly colorblind, so I'll just take your word for it. Yeah, Nicola in chat saying I'm a red, black, and white person, so when people use more color, I'm in awe. Yeah, like you were talking about how you think it's harder to design, create in black and white or with like a limited palette, but your artwork is so colorful, and I've asked you this question many times before, but like any tips on like learning or like expanding your vernacular or picking up a couple of different pans in your kitchen to tell your story?
I suppose it's more just like there's yeah, I think I'm trying to do this a little bit more and more nowadays, where I spend probably a little bit too much time on my color, and what that means is I don't necessarily get the illustration to where I need to get it quickly enough. Like, and it's not about like, it's not necessarily always about speed, and you should always kind of focus more on like getting the illustration right rather than making sure that it's all kind of super fast and good. But there is this point where, you know, if all you're doing is going like, oh, what if this was green and that was red? Okay, what if the green thing was blue and the red thing was a slightly darkish? And then you could just go on for like years, and it's not actually really doing anything. So there's this idea that's like maybe try and keep a lid on how many colors you use in a single piece. And one of the good guides for that is something we've spoken about before, is the 60-30-10 rule, where you have like, you pick your main color. Like if you want to do, if your image is going to be quite sort of dark or dramatic or whatever, then you might have a very darker color, like some like dark navy blue or something. And that will make up 60% of your image, right? Like you'll use that in 60% throughout. And then you've got a slightly different color, like maybe in the same kind of tones, of like, you know, still a kind of a blue or a green or like a cool color. And you'll use that at like 30%. And then 10% will be some pickup color. That'll be like the mustard to your image, right? So for instance, with your example of like black, white, and red, which is a super strong, very contrasting color scheme to use. A lot of people do it. I generally just switch the red out with pink when I'm doing something like that. Just because, yeah, that's me. But that would be your pink or your red in that instance would be your 10%. That's the little pickup. That's the little bit of like salt or mustard that will just make your image just have that little bit of kind of flavor, make it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
So that would be my go. To be honest, lately, if we have time, I'll show you guys how to do this on this and how it works and why I do it. But I've actually lately been trying out working in grayscale, so black and white, but kind of like still with tones, so not just pure black and white. The difficulty of working in black and white is that there's no tonal values. You have to draw the tonal values in yourself, so like cell shading and all that kind of stuff, and that can be quite challenging if you've got something that's very detailed. You get and this also happens if you use like too many colors. You get this thing of like, it becomes very difficult to make out your image. The point of color is to bring stuff out. Like, so for instance, on this illustration, the eyes are going to be super important because they, like, obviously the eyes are the windows of the soul, all that kind of stuff. But in manga and comic book, this is telling you like what's happening. The direction of the eyes is telling you the direction of the picture, like all this stuff. So the eyes are going to be super important. So let's say, for instance, that I did all of this in these kind of like darker blues, like everything would be along those tones, but then I'd have to do the eyes in like gold yellow or something that's really going to pick them up from the overall kind of tones of blue and stuff that I've got everywhere else, because that will mean that your attention will be drawn to that because it's standing out.
Nice.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you want to use your colors in that way. And so if you're using too many colors, then you get this kind of thing where it becomes super hard to make out what your image is. And everything is competing with each other. It's exactly the same thing as you have too many flavors in your thing. It just becomes this kind of like, it becomes very muddy and not really easy to make out what's what in your image. And that can be really tricky because it becomes the kind of the death of your image where I can't see what's happening here and how it's happening. Yeah.
Your eye doesn't know where to go.
Yeah, you're not telling your viewer what to look at and what to pay attention to in your image, and that I think is a big issue where, you know, this is kind of telling a story. It has to tell a story, and so in that sense, you need to make sure that you're using the right words at the right time for your audience to be able to like get what you're trying to tell them.
Yeah,
100%.
That's cool. Makes sense. Hey, we were talking about eyes before, and there was a question. Where is it? From Ryan. Looks great. You don't think the left eyes are out of place? Should they be reversed? That was the question. I think I know the answer, but do you want to answer that one?
This one?
Yeah, I think so.
So originally when I flipped them over, because I duplicated these ones to pop them over here. So originally they were sitting here.
Yeah, so they were
like
mirrored,
that.
like they were symmetrical.
Yeah, exactly. I've popped them over here because I want this, like this train or this monster train is moving this way. And so it's looking in the direction that it's moving. And so both eyes should be looking in the direction that it's going. So if I have it kind of like this, it can work as well. but all of a sudden now it's looking back at you. So it's a different action. So
Yeah.
both work, but again, it depends on the narrative of the image that you're trying to build, and how you're trying to build it. But I think that's absolutely a fair question to ask, in the sense that it is, it might seem a little bit weird that way, but that's the kind of the narrative that I'm trying to tell in the story, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, it makes total sense. It's like a crab monster, and he's like sliding along like this, so he's going to be looking where he's going. That's how I'm.
Train crab monster.
Train crab monster. They're lethal in Sydney. They just another one of the very violent wildlife, like the drop bears, that'll get you.
Train crabs.
Train crabs has a different meaning in Sydney. So if you guys have questions as well as we're going along that's related to the artwork or other stuff, we have time for questions. We might even go old school and take a little bit of a Q&A break, like halfway through, because we have up to 2 hours today. So if you have like questions around like freelancing or artwork, or any kind of like pertinent kind of questions around like being a creative, maybe you're a student, or maybe you're trying to learn a new skill or something like that, that you think you would like to hear what Jeremy has to say about it, now is a great time to do it. We love getting questions in chat and hearing, what you're thinking about.
Yeah, and like you said, it doesn't need to be related to this artwork. It can just be more general topics.
Yep. Was there any like reference or inspiration for this monster that you thought of before you jumped in, or did you start just?
No, not really. There's no like a lot of time when I'm doing an illustration, I will include little kind of nerdy references to stuff. Like I'll put like a little like Star Wars logo somewhere, or I'll hide a little Super Mario reference in there or something. But this one is more just kind of trying to be a little bit like those crazy, like weird looking monsters that you'd see on those old like early 80s, late 70s kind of Japanese sitcoms, like Power Rangers and all that, except Japanese versions. So they're always like all those monsters, those kaiju that they do, like like Godzilla or whatever. They'd always, in those kind of early ones, I absolutely love them, because you can see how they're made. Like it's literally a guy, and you can see that they use like plastic water bottles for his things, or like when he gets hit, the crab pincers kind of fold, and you can see that they're actually made of rubber. And
yeah,
I love that. I absolutely love that. It's so cool to see, like, wow, okay, cool. This is super budget, but it just adds to that kind of like nerdiness to it.
Yeah, and
that creativity of like, wow, you guys made like a really cool looking monster out of like recycled water bottles and like a broom, and it looks absolutely awesome.
All right, we're gonna have to sidetrack a little bit, and I'm gonna have to talk to you about this. Do you have Disney Plus?
I do, yeah.
All right, have you seen the Marvel? There's like a Marvel series called Marvel like Earth 616 or whatever it is. Have you seen that? It's like
I've
a documentary.
heard of it, but yeah, no, I haven't watched it.
All right, basically they do a different, like they focus on different things. They focus on a whole episode on like cosplay around like cosplaying community, and like a lot of people that cosplay Marvel stuff. But they do one around Japanese Spider-Man. And it's a whole bunch. Awesome. It's a whole story that I had no idea about, but it's all around like this American guy who was in Japan who was like they would love Spider-Man if we can make it more Japanese. And it's all about like the guy, pardon me, the actor. They're interviewing the actor who's like still alive and everything, talking about it, like a lot of the characters in there, how it was like super different, but how it was like beloved in Japan. I think it was the 80s, and Stan Lee's like in it a little bit and all that sort of stuff. It's really cool. And it's everything you're talking about, like how they had like no budget, but how they did all the special effects, like how they tried to make it look as if Spider-Man's climbing up the poles, and they actually had the actor like do just like some absolutely wild things. They're like, oh yeah, in this scene we couldn't work out how to do it with special effects, so we just made him climb to the top of the building with like no rope, because we couldn't edit it out back then and all that sort of stuff.
I love all that kind of stuff as well. It's like how they show you how special effects were made back in the days before like CGI and all that kind of stuff. It's some of that stuff is so clever and so inventive.
Yeah.
And like they show you like in a Charlie Chaplin movie or something, and it's just like, we shot this, and then just painted on a piece of glass in front of it is the background of like New York, and then we just move the camera so that they align. But he's actually just next to a swimming pool, and it just looks like he's on top of a skyscraper. It's like,
have you seen the roller skate? There's like
where he goes close to the edge, but then like turns around at the last minute. It's like, that is so wild. Like, it's perfect, exactly that. Like, pop it on a piece of glass and film it through the glass, and it just looks like there's a ledge there.
Incredible, right? Yeah. But yeah, some bit Nicola in chat, like some people saying, it's really cool. I really enjoyed that series. So it's on Disney Plus. I don't know if you can find it anywhere else, but
it's called Earth 616.
I can't remember what it's called. I don't want to bring up Netflix right now. But sorry, not Netflix, Disney Plus right now. But I'll find it. I'll find it, you guys. We got time. I'll find it. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll just start watching it. It helps if you're like a Marvel geek, but let's check it out.
So as always, I'm using my super thick outlines, and that will just mean my colors will be a lot easier to apply later on.
Nice.
When I get to that, are we going for time? Yeah, cool. We got time. I'm pretty much done with the inking. If you guys want to know a little bit more about digital inking in like Photoshop, Illustrator, I've actually got a YouTube channel that I will plug shamelessly.
Oh, cool.
Where I've done a bunch of tutorials on all the things that I kind of do. And there's a digital inking and in Illustrator and in Photoshop at the moment. So that's all the things that I would kind of be looking at doing right now. So if you're kind of looking at like what's your brush settings and how would you do it, all that kind of stuff. I'll touch upon also a little bit later in the stream halftones and halftone shading, which is always a really cool thing. We're talking about like using limited colors and how black and white kind of presents certain challenges. Halftones can definitely be something that will help with that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Nice. I found it around the same time Johanna also found it for me. So yeah, Marvel 616. It's like a documentary within, well, it's kind of weird. Like every episode is a little bit different, but yeah, the first one is the Japanese Spider-Man, which I loved, like sort of thing that I've shown people because I enjoyed it so much. There's also another really funny one with Paul Scheer. He just basically tries to resurrect like essentially the worst like Marvel comics that failed and make them popular and try to get them into the cinematic universe, and it's pretty funny. But yeah, check it out if you're interested in that sort of thing. I know Jeremy will be, so that's some homework for you. 100%. You'll love it.
All right, cool. So my inking is pretty much done. I've got everything that I kind of need to do here. The thick outlines, as I said, is a stylistic thing, but it's also a functional thing where now I can add colors behind it. But it definitely helps to give it that kind of slightly more cartoony vibe. It's not super sort of traditional anime. A lot of that generally tends to use thinner lines. But what I do is I pop all that on a layer that I usually just call OTL for outline. And then I do all my colors in a folder underneath to kind of work a little bit more kind of cleanly in that sense. So I'm being a good boy in naming my layers today, but that's not necessarily always the case. So yeah, so now comes time to like choose some colors. And we're going to do something that's going to kind of match well with the overall kind of yellowy beigeness of this image. So we want something that's going to kind of maybe contrast a little bit with that. So I'm going to go with kind of overall kind of purple vibes and kind of light bluish and kind of cooler colors. So what I would do is I would just kind of go in here and go with like let's do, I'm feeling that might be appropriate. Working in RGB as always. So my image mode RGB, much wider color range and much easier to get those kind of neon colors that we're looking at.
Yeah.
So if your colors are not working, or if you're doing a neon and it's coming out quite faded, it's most likely because you are in CMYK, which is for print, but most printers nowadays with the salt will be able to print an RGB file as well. Nice. So yeah, so this is just me using now the lasso tool and filling in. As you can see, this is where like my thick outline here just gives me that kind of buffer to make mistakes. Like if I do this kind of super wavy line, it doesn't need to be super, super clean. It just needs to kind of fulfill that as I need to. And then what I do sometimes, this varies. Today I'm doing this one, but another day I might do it a little bit differently. And I've just realized I've forgotten to ink in a bit here. What I might do on this one, for instance, is I am doing a base color. So I'm doing the whole entire illustration in the same color. And why that's helpful is it'll be helpful later on to make selections of that and to fill stuff. So it's kind of allowing me to save time on different things later on, maybe. Sometimes I find that super helpful. Sometimes I find that's a bit of a pain. So sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. Yeah, it just really just depends on how I'm feeling that day and what I'm likely to kind of color up and do on something. So nice. This is not necessarily like, hey, yeah, you should always do this, because I don't necessarily always do this.
Do as I say, not as I do, unless I say not to do it.
Yep, exactly. Sometimes. Within reason. Yep. Use your own judgment. It's up to you. Do what you want.
Always. 50% of the time it works. Every time. So we're getting back to the superhero talk. Yeah, Nicola. Glad we're getting back to the superhero talk. Yes, we are. Johanna's just asked in chat, favorite Marvel superheroes. Do you have one? Are you into the Marvel stuff? I don't actually know how into it you are. Be careful, because quite a few people in chat quite like it, so, including me. I'll just turn your mic off if you said no.
No, I am definitely. I've been talking about Disney Plus. I've been rewatching all the MCU movies in order of timeline.
A lot of people have been doing that lately. Like my brother and his wife have been doing that, and someone else mentioned it the other day. So you're like the third person that's mentioned that. I wonder why.
So it's funny because it's like I love MCU and I love all the Marvel things, but it's probably not my area of expertise the most. I'm not super savvy.
Yeah.
Now I know all the things because we all know the things now, or at least the things that they've decided to show us in the movies. But when a lot of those movies were coming out, a lot of those post-credit scenes didn't really make sense to me. Whereas a lot of other people would be like, oh, that's that dude, or whatever.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah.
So now, watching them in order of timeline actually makes heaps more sense of, why that end credit scene and what's happening. And, okay, I see what they were doing here. They were setting up this one, and that's where, because they came out in a kind of a loose, weird order.
Yeah.
Watching them in order of the actual story developing is actually super interesting. So my favorite, I don't know.
It's tough.
Great question.
I'll let you think about it while I'll tell you everyone else's. So Steve, Daredevil, Nicola, Spider-Man, Mural, Magneto. I like that. Off the cuff. Where are we? Captain Marvel for Johanna. Agent Carter and the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is really great. Yeah, it is really good. Very partial to Deadpool, but I think in terms of the comics, the one that I'm most excited to to read is actually Hulk. And he seems like such a like straightforward character, but the comic, I don't know if they just put the best people on that comic or something. But I'm like, yeah, new Hulk, what is going to happen here? So it's a bit different, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe compared to like character that you might like, compared to like a comic that I might be like excited to read.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of different ways to think about it.
I might be super unoriginal and go with Wolverine.
Yeah. Wolverine's pretty solid everywhere.
Yeah. There's, I don't know, something kind of nice. It's for the same reason I also kind of like Batman or Deadpool. And I know that Batman, before anybody rage quits, I know that that's not Marvel.
We just lost half of half of our followers.
But yeah, there's something kind of cool about the anti-hero hero.
Yeah.
Like the kind of slightly dark, don't really want to do the thing. So I find like, and apologies anybody out there who's a massive fan of Captain America, like I find Captain America just insipid. Just like, oh man. First of all, there's something about like the idea of like, and I know this is created by Americans and it's just like, that's just the way it goes. But there's something about that is like Captain America, and he's basically wearing a giant American flag for a uniform. There's something a little bit just kind of like, wow, okay, cool. You guys just really just
it's a bit on the nose.
And service yourself. But it's just this idea that is just like, it's all about justice and righteousness. And it's like, oh man, it just seems so like two-dimensional to me.
Right. Yeah.
There's something kind of nice about like, well, yeah, he'll save you, but he might kick you in the teeth while he's doing it, and that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, and in America, you don't have universal healthcare, so that's a problem. Yeah, Wolverine. Lots of people into Wolverine. Johanna's saying, note to self: read some Hulk comics. Yeah, when I first started getting into it, Matt Leach, my buddy from Australian Design Radio, is a massive comic book nerd. And I said, what should I read first if I'm trying to get into it? This is before I read any of the comics. And he was like, Planet Hulk, like immediately. And I was like, really? I have no interest in the Hulk. And he's like, dude, just read it. It's like the best. And I read it and I'm like, okay, he was right. That was awesome. So Planet Hulk is a really good one to start with if you're reading comics.
That one ties into Ragnarok, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. They pick up a couple of it. I think that's something that they did really well. Like, you know, like like when I saw the first trailer for that, I was like, oh, cool, they're doing Planet Hulk. And I'm like, wait, Thor's there? What's going on? But basically they kind of like take the best of like, you know, 3 or 4 different comic arcs and go, cool, that's really cool. We'll take this bit from over here and here's how it ties in, which I think is really a clever way that they've done it.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah, there's a lot of different kind of things going on. With all that stuff, I think as well is the idea of like all the like Avengers universe versus X-Men kind of universe, and like for instance, like yeah, Wolverine is probably my favorite, but there's a lot of stuff happening in Avengers kind of as well. But I feel like the characters are a little bit more fleshed out as X-Men. They're a little bit more nuanced than Avengers. I feel like a lot of them are just that kind of like, I do good because I'm a good person and I have a green and a blue lightsaber. You're a baddie. You have a red lightsaber.
Right. Oh, we can't get into Star Wars as well.
Did you ever watch that video actually of how Samuel L. Jackson chose the purple lightsaber for Mace Windu?
No, I haven't. Did you just want one and they were like, okay?
Well, I mean, obviously this has all been set up, and I think, yeah, he probably just requested it, and they were like, all right, fine, whatever. But there's this video of him like talking to George Lucas, and he's like, all right, so traditionally the good guys have a green or a blue lightsaber, and the bad people have red lightsaber. And just Sam Jackson's just like, oh, okay, well, no purple, and just it's like, no purple. And obviously then he ended up getting purple, but
yeah, there's
something kind of interesting about that as well. It's that like base thing of like, baddies are red, goodies are blue and green.
Right.
Oh, come on.
I guess that's the challenge we run into when it's like trying to take something from like, you know, our childhood, or for probably a lot of people watching like before their childhood, and like the things were a little bit more on the nose now, and like they can be much more nuanced now. I think like the more we watch, we have a higher expectation of things, and you know, twists and turns, and maybe not so black and white, and yeah, but you can
yeah, for sure.
It's probably a really hard balance to go through. Uriel saying, yeah, he said I want purple. Probably threw in an expletive at there as well.
Probably.
That's cool. We're getting towards the halfway point. So in like 5 minutes or so, if you want to, Jeremy, if it seems like a good idea to just take a break. It's important to take a break when you're designing. Stretch your legs and
it is.
Stretch your hands and stuff like that. So we'll do that here.
Fresh look on what you're doing.
Yeah, take a little bit of a perspective, a little bit of a quick little break before we jump back in. But what we'll do is we'll just answer a couple of questions. So if there's any particular questions that you want to talk about, I mean, we can just keep talking about Star Wars and Marvel. Like I'm totally but anything else as well. We'll take a couple of questions and then we'll get back into the drawing and illustrating and creating. And here's a question for chat. Did Samuel Jackson survive the fall? Discuss. One of my friends who you know, Jeremy Dean, he's super into the Star Wars like fan fiction side of things. Like he's like, I haven't watched a movie or watched anything again for a long time, but just watches YouTube video after YouTube video of like fan fiction and like theories and what's coming next and people talking about like, you know, the universe and everything like that. And he's like, you know, he survived, right? And I was like, is that like canon? Is that proved? And that was the night. That's all we spoke about all night. But yeah.
Well, it's a bit more interesting if he has, right? Like,
yeah,
just you can add to the story a little bit.
Sure.
So what I just did, actually, I'll just go back on what I just did. This is one of the reasons why sometimes I will paint a whole kind of base layer is to color in the tongue when I'm not too sure about what colors I want to kind of do stuff. Because I've already done the bulk of the selection with this thing, I only need to be careful of doing the tongue to like isolate it while it's in the drawing. As long as it's outside, there's nothing there, so it doesn't really matter. So I'll just do a selection and then duplicate that, so Command J, and now I've got the tongue on a separate layer, which I will then go in and color shift to until I kind of find something that I like a little bit. So
cool.
As much as like, you know, there's all kind of a lot of talk about trying to think about what colors you're going to use and how you're going to use them. There's a lot of times where literally all I will do is think about an overall kind of color scheme that I want to work with. But then after that, it's just a free for all. It just kind of, it'll evolve as I'm kind of doing the piece. It'll change depending on how it kind of ends up looking and, you know, what I need to do. So this isn't something that's necessarily like I'm going to be too wedded to either.
Yeah. And is it because it's like a big chunk of like, it's like a separate big chunky kind of like element? What word am I looking for? Like a different like kind of element. So yeah,
totally. So again, like this is where you can start to have like a bit too many layers and it starts to be a little bit too micromanagey on your file, and that's never really a good thing. But yeah, essentially like that will be something to kind of think about for me, where, you know, what do I put on what layers? Like, do I put the tongue on a separate layer? Do I probably do definitely the smoke on a separate layer? So start kind of naming those layers so that I can kind of see what's happening, just so that then I can, you know, smoke.
That's a Star Wars thing just stuck in your head.
Should be. Yeah, so again, I can just go like, I'll just go and select the smoke in here and take that out and duplicate it onto a different layer. Just it saves time on like selection and all that kind of stuff. Like so. Okay. and then I can just change the color. So the smoke should be probably slightly kind of lighter color like that. Maybe in keeping. So what I wouldn't do, for instance, is just go with like a gray, right? That's like, I mean, it works, it's fine, but it's a little bit boring and it's not necessarily in keeping with the color palette that I'm going for. So what I generally tend to do is, even if you have like a tiny little bit of green, so like at first it looks gray, but there's actually just a little bit of color in it.
Right.
Just makes it so much more interesting to kind of look at that way. So I maybe put like just a little bit of blue in there, depending on how it kind of ends up turning out. But yeah, so this is also what I'm talking about here. Like if I go with something like this from a distance, that's gonna make the tongue and the smoke quite hard to read. So I need to think about how that's gonna look. And often it can be a good idea to zoom out of your image so that we can kind of see how it's all looking. So maybe the eyes in here get lost into the smoke because those two colors here are quite similar. So it's maybe a good idea to bring it back into the greens a little bit. And that for me now is working a lot better. There's a little bit more legibility in this image.
That's cool. Is that something you do a lot, zoom out?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. 100%. Any time lapse that I will do, I have to kind of be a little bit careful because it will become very quickly this thing of like, nausea inducing kind of thing because it's just going in and out so quickly all the time. That it's not a great thing to have happen too often. Teeth are going to be teeth colored,
of course, but they're like they haven't been brushed in a while, right?
Yeah. This guy's not a fan of oral hygiene.
Hasn't flossed in some time.
You just gave me an idea to put little bits of leftover food in his teeth.
Passengers or?
No,
we won't get too graphic.
Passengers.
Just shapes. The user can like fill in the blanks. I think that's always safer.
All right, so this is starting to kind of come together a little bit. There'll be, in a minute, I'll also add in some shading as well. Shading always helps to kind of draw out the volume of an image and make that image a lot clearer to the viewer. But yeah, you've got to get those eyebrows in first. Eyes and eyebrows, always super expressive.
I was going to say, do you want to take that break sometime soon?
Yeah, sure. Happy to take a break anytime.
Let's take a break. Let's, just wiggle your fingers, stretch your hands. Don't stand up because then we won't be able to see you. I'm just going to jump big Jeremy and Big Flynn up on the thing, so we're not looking at your desktop at the moment. Just while we just answer a couple of questions. It's got a few that have come through. Festus said, "I'll use Festus and Steve interchangeably. It's just force of habit." I noted a pic of Jeremy on his Insta doing a real world mural. Are there more of these to come?
Yes, there are. I've got a couple of jobs at the moment. It's something that I'm trying to do a little bit more. As much as my heart will always be in digital land, there's something really nice about doing actual paint, like working with brushes, spray cans, and doing a piece, even if it doesn't necessarily last super long. One of the, I think I was going to say flaws. It's not necessarily flaws, but one of the slight sort of downsides of working digitally all the time is your work doesn't really exist as such unless you print it. But there's definitely no original. There's no like, this is the piece. Everything else is just a reproduction of it.
Yeah.
So there's something nice about working on a mural. It gets me out of my studio and out of in front of my computer. Yeah. But B, it's also nice to just like, apply an image and color to a real life setting onto like a mural like that. So it's definitely something that I'm trying to get more work in doing, and so far it's panning out. But it comes with its own set of challenges for sure.
Yeah, cool, awesome, great question. So Nicola asks, pardon me. have you always created the same way, traditionally and digital? Couple ways you could answer that, but so take your pick.
How do you mean traditionally? Like analog, like not digital, I guess. So digitally has not always been the same way, for sure. In terms of the techniques that I would use, it would be always a little bit kind of different techniques. And even today, these days, I mean, this is something that I do quite a lot with this inking kind of style that you're seeing here, but every now and then there'll be a slightly different kind of technique, or you learn something new and you test it out and you incorporate it into your artwork. So there's always that kind of stuff happening. But from a traditional perspective, I was sort of classically trained. So as in like, so for instance, the first year of college, we were told we were not allowed to use any computers at all. We had to do everything by hand. And that includes like typography and imagery and all that. Yeah. And that sounds like a bit of a nightmare and a headache. And I'm not going to lie, it was. But it really kind of teaches you a sense of craft, I guess.
Yeah. I hear a lot of like typographers, like people that are into type and using type a lot, kind of like, like, you know, you really need to kind of understand like why, like how the physical leading was done and how the spacing used to done to really appreciate, because people, you know, obviously we just go, oh, sure, do this, 100%. Done kind of thing. But actually going back to that original craft of where it came from originally, can add a lot of value to when you're working digitally and not just kind of flippantly be doing stuff.
Yeah, totally. Just like, you know, working with these digital brushes, it's important to understand how like you would do analog inking and how you would work with a pencil sketch, and how like all these things that are just like, I think all these programs like Photoshop, they're just like an extension of the real world in a sense. They don't like, I guess this is maybe going to sound a bit negative, but the concepts, the basic concepts behind programs like Photoshop, Illustrator are nothing new. They're based in the analog worlds. The idea of a paintbrush or a pencil or a layer, all these things existed before Photoshop came and made that so much smoother and simpler. But those things are based in that. So understanding how and like what you were talking about, like leading and spacing and all these different things, even down to the terminology and type, like if you understand how that used to be done with like a print press and you press letters onto a piece of paper, like it gives you a certain understanding of how that works and how you should use them. And if nothing else, it also like gives you a sense of respect for the craft as well a little bit. Yeah,
totally. Very cool. Johanna sent me a message saying challenge for the future for Jeremy is you have to draw Captain America, which I just thought was really funny. Good call. Let's end with an easy one. You can still throw questions in after this as well. Nicola's clarified. So traditionally, traditionally I do hyperrealism, but digitally is completely different. Let us know if we answered your question correctly.
So I guess what she's getting at with that then is like the way that I would paint a mural, like for instance this kind of style is what I would paint on murals, is pretty much the same process, but it's kind of inverted, where here you do the outlines first and you put the colors behind it. When you're doing a wall, you tend to do a sketch and then do the fills, and then you do the outlines last on top, because the outlines are what kind of seals it all down. But that's the nice thing about Photoshop is you can do all of that and then you can stick something behind it to kind of use those layers. But yeah, when you're working on a mural, it's a similar process, but just kind of flipped on its head a little bit.
Oh, cool. Very good. Easy question to go out on. What color lightsaber would you want?
Well, yeah, I'd have to go with neon pink. Actually, I think I'd want a gradient. I'd want like a
gradient.
Changing one. Like I'd want one that goes from like
That's
pink to blue and just like changes with my mood, you know, like reflects what I'm feeling inside.
Like a mood ring. Why is it always so grumpy? Yeah, that's cool. I like that. Mine will be yellow. Captain Australia, Johanna corrected me. Captain Australia. So there you go.
That could be interesting.
What would Captain Australia look like? First thoughts. Is he wearing like, I mean, there's probably a boomerang in there. I mean, it depends how cliche you want to go, right?
Well, yeah. Also, I guess it depends on what
It
you want to
should be.
say is like the most like. Are we talking about, you know, Indigenous Australia? Or are we talking about white Australia? Like there might be slightly
Yeah.
different take on that. That could be super interesting to look at as well, and maybe do something that's not super expected
Mm.
with this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's funny actually. It's also like talking about those kind of things. What what most people would, what non-Australians would see as Australia would probably be the boomerang and the shrimp on the barbie and all that kind of stuff.
Or
Um,
like a barbecue tong with a shrimp on it or something.
yeah, but that's not necessarily um, what the reality is, I guess, from like a cultural perspective. So
Mm.
yeah, that kind of stuff is always interesting to look at and try and do something a little bit different or a bit more interesting than
Mm.
what's completely expected.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. In terms of lightsabers that people will want, you've gone with just a full spectrum, which is really greedy. I'll just have every color. We've got pink. Johanna's saying rainbow lightsaber. Yes. Gray is an option. Is there? Nicola will go red. White. Yeah. Okay, so you're all saying, yeah, Captain Australia would have to have a koala sidekick. That's,
Yeah,
that's fair.
yeah, that's fair enough. So here's another little thing as well that's kind of cool with blocking out layers like this is, as you can see, I've got like the tongue here is on a separate layer. If I'm kind of adding color to this, I can actually lock the transparent pixels, so that if I do my selection like all over the place over here, it doesn't really matter as long as I'm clean in the selection as it stands inside where the pink pixels are. If I then go ahead and lock that the transparency, which is this little kind of checkerboard up here, it actually locks that, and I can fill with a different color, and it doesn't actually fill the outside. So it's always a kind of a nice thing to have. If I don't have that selected, then obviously it's going to blast that all over my
Just
selection.
feels everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's something that I will do every now and then if I'm working on something like this and I'm putting that on the same kind of layer. I don't need to be super clean as long as I'm inside that kind of layer. And it just means that, again, job is a bit easier.
That's cool. Just a quick shout out to Zaid, who's saying this is the first stream that they've watched, and you've actually mentioned something that I think is really valuable for this kind of like having a live chat and doing everything live and being able to like answer questions and interact with you guys. Saying like where is it? As a beginner, it helps a lot working next to someone. Yeah, so that's the thing, right? Like, and this is, I think, something that a lot of us has affected a lot of creatives lately. Myself included, even though I'm not doing a lot of craft these days, but I've spent a lot of time like working in design schools and studios and like sitting next to, including Jeremy here, sitting next to like people that are incredibly talented, incredibly creative in lots of different ways. And you just learn so much, right? Like you learn so much from sitting next to someone who's just like, oh, I like lean over, how'd you do that? Or what are you doing? And then it's like, there's, you really, that little nuance of not just like looking something up, how do I do this step one to the end, but it's all these little things like how Jeremy like just locked that layer and locked the pixels and showed that, this is, with my art style, this is a really useful thing. And we get that a lot on the stream. So we'll be trying to, we'll have an artist or creative on here who will be showing their workflow. And the whole point is to show you, for example, how to create something in Illustrator, bring it into After Effects and add a simple animation. And that's the point of the stream. But through the journey of that stream, and I'm thinking of an exact example with Adrienne where she just kind of showed how you can paint inside in Illustrator. And I was like, whoa, what did you do then? I've never seen anybody do that before. And we all learnt from that, but it was not the purpose of the stream. It's just something that, she naturally did, or in this case, like Jeremy with the locking pixels, like will naturally do. And then it's super, super useful, I think, for all of us. So welcome. That's my tangent.
Yeah, no, it is. I think that's definitely a good thing to mention is looking at that stuff. And I've caught myself at times being like, I know Photoshop. I don't need to watch this Photoshop tutorial video.
Right.
And then you watch it and you just like, whoa, how have I never seen this? Like, yeah, it's mad. Like, so like we were talking about halftones before. So I'll quickly show you something so I used to do halftones in a way that can or can't make sense. Again, there's always that same thing with Photoshop, Illustrator, all these Adobe programs. There's never really a kind of like a yes or no answer, right? Should I do it like this? Like, depends.
Right.
Which can be kind of frustrating, I think, for people when they're kind of first starting out.
Yeah.
Of just tell me what to do. It's like,
how many pieces of work should be in my portfolio?
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. What color are your shoes? What? How's that related? So what I used to do when I would do halftones is a bit of a convoluted process, but I would, let me make a new layer here, for instance. So I would kind of do this. So if I'm doing like a shading on these, on this kind of smoke cloud here. So let's pop in some basic kind of shapes. There we go. And then I would fill this with like a almost kind of 50% gray. So this kind of neutral gray, it sits halfway in between the black and the white. And then I would fill that. And then what I would do is I would go up to my filter, pixelate, color halftone. And this is where the kind of the guesswork would come in. So I would go 45, 45, 45, just so that everything's at a 45-degree angle. And then the radius here would kind of depend on the scale of my image. And this is where it can kind of start to stuff around with it. So let me hit return on that. And there we go. So that's a halftone. Yeah, and it depends. If I'd chosen a darker gray, then those dots would be closer together, giving you the sense of a darker image. And then I would put this on a multiply layer. The thing is that's all fun and good, but if I want my dots to be a certain color, that's a bit of a problem. So I'd have to go and select the white, select similar, and delete all of that. And then I can actually change the color of my thing. So as you can see, like I'm not going through the whole process here because I'll show you guys a bit of an easier way to do that. But that used to be the kind of the way that I would do it and get a kind of a color halftone in there. So what I would normally do on something like this, obviously, is I would make the whole image that and then apply a layer mask to this rather than fill a selection. Because if I want to go like, oh, I want some more over here, I got to redo that process all over again. So that's not super smart way to work. So let me undo that. What I've started doing lately is I watched this video that I was like, I don't know to watch this. I know how to do this. And then this guy showed how to do kind of this like screen tone, like lo-fi effect on a photograph, which again is like the reason why I was not necessarily super keen on watching this. Is like, I don't use photographs, so I don't need to watch this. This is not something that I would do. But within the video, he showed how he kind of created this halftone pattern, and that just blew my mind. And I just go, oh, wow, how have I not seen this before? How have I not thought about this before? So what I do is now I would literally just like make a new layer, and same thing, I'll just make this super rough selection here, and that's messed it up, but there we go, that'll do. And then down here in my effects panel, my layer kind of adjustments panel, I would just fill that with a pattern. And so that will fill with all the different kind of patterns that I've written. But what I've done is I've created a range of different halftones, and I'll show you guys how to do that in a tick. Because what it does is it allows me to kind of control to a much higher standard the effect that's done. So right now, because I'm working on a relatively low res image, the dots seem quite big, but if I scale those down, all of a sudden I've got a live control over how big those dots are. Not only that, but that's already on a layer. So if I want some more down here, I can come in and fill that layer mask with more, so it's just adding more and more, but it's also on its own opacity layer. So once I'm done with all of this, I can actually rasterize this image, rasterize layer, done. And now I can fill this with a different color. So I don't have to go through that whole process. And it's always a little bit easier to use. So the problem is with rasterizing, then it's no longer live, right? So if I go ahead and click on that, I can change it to something else, right? So I can change it to different dots, and all of this is super live. So that's always going to be super handy for me to use. I can rescale it if I want to, all that kind of stuff. So that's usually the way to go for me now whenever I'm doing kind of halftones. The way you do it is quite simply like this. So if you go into my patterns here, you'll notice I've got a range of different patterns. Oop, and there you go. I've got something like this, for instance, right? So this is my kind of Japanese fish scale pattern, and that can scale bigger or smaller depending on, and it just fills it automatically. And then I've gone and made a few different kind of halftones in here. So let's cancel that. I'm going to show you guys real quick how to do this. So we're going to make a square. We're going to go into mils. We're going to go quite small, and I'm going to go 20 by 20 mil, so 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters. There we go. I need to delete my background, so I'm going to get rid of that and make my layer transparent here. And then I'm doing this super quick because I'm trying to get back to the drawing as quickly as possible. But
this is cool. This is great.
So what I'll do here is I'll do a dot, right? So the size of the dot obviously is going to have a huge implication on the density and the darkness of that screen tone. So I've made a shape, so not a selection. I've actually made a shape here with my vector tools, and I'd want a no stroke, and I wanted to fill it with black. And because I've got my guides on, if I stick this in the middle of my image, it'll snap to the middle. So there you go. So you can see those pink lines there that come up. That's the middle. And then I'm going to duplicate this image 4 more times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and there we go. So now I'm going to pop 1 up in the corner. And because again, I've got my guides on, it snaps perfectly. So I've got exactly a quarter of that image. There we go. Same thing. Move it up there. Control T. Pop it down here. And so you can kind of guess what I'm doing now, how this is going to be a repeat pattern, because as I'm doing this, those 4 corners, when they repeat, will become full squares, right? Because we'll have a square on either side of this. So smash all of this down, Command A to select all, edit, define pattern, and we'll call this halftone this, so I know how to delete it later. Halftone, done. So there we go. I could even leave this open if I wanted to come back and edit it later. But now what it's done is, if I make a selection here, pop a new layer, go down to my fill pattern, that will now be...
I love that the leaves come up every time.
Yeah. So that's now here, right? So that's the one that I just made. And there we go.
Nice. So
that's it. So, right. So I've made a sample from that, and I can change the scale of the dots. So how close the dots were together, how big your image is as well. So you can see here, for instance, I've got a bunch of different halftones that look like they're the same in the preview. So these ones are labeled halftone large, halftone medium, halftone small, and then I've got large, tight, medium, tight, small, tight.
And you can just you can just create those and then save them and use them for any projects that you have in the future, so they're just ready to roll.
Exactly. But it also depends on the image size, right? So you can notice here, for instance, these ones are 236 pixels by 236. The smaller ones, the tighter ones, are 118 pixels. So if I go on here, for instance, you can see that if I go back and scale this down a little bit, you'll see those dots seem a lot bigger. If I go down to the same one, which is LT, the dots will be smaller because the image size of my sample is smaller. So this is where it's important for you guys to think about when you create a sample like this, what are the dimensions of this image? If you make it too big, Photoshop won't be able to cope with the scale, because there's only a limit amount of scale that you can make this down to. So if you make this too big, 1%, which is the min you can make it, will still be too big for you. So have a bit of a think about what you do and all that kind of stuff. But that's essentially what I would do from now on, is kind of work with these kind of halftones rather than the actual halftone filter palette. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Again, it comes with a mask, so I can just kind of work to that. And it's live, so I can change it if I need to. as long as I don't change the color, I'll be good to go.
Cool.
There is also, if you can't be bothered with doing any of that stuff, and that's absolutely fair enough, there is also a bunch of halftone brushes that you can get.
So that was going to be my follow-up question.
Where you can kind of do this and paint that in there accordingly. But the problem with those is that, as you guys can see, my dots don't change. The size of my dots don't change according to the size of my brush.
Oh, right. You can't change that in the brush settings or anything like that?
No, you need
a bigger
maybe you
brush.
can actually. Maybe you can. Size?
Spacing?
Yeah, no, see, that's...
What about spacing?
No. Because it's using a particular sample of that. So it's not controlling the actual size of this. I might be wrong about this. I don't really play around with brushes too much, as you guys probably know by now. But yeah, if anybody knows otherwise and that you can change the size of those, then please shout out, because that's always a good thing to have in there. But yeah, there are brushes, there are ways to do it. So you can also work with kind of halftones in that way. So
that was
halftone
awesome.
Is a little bit of a manga language. It's a good kind of like, thing to have to kind of showcase manga style. What I would normally do if I'm not doing that is, because I've got all of these guys on a separate, in a group, is I would actually go in and put a hue sat effect on that, make sure it's only applied to the group, and then lower the lightness, boost the opacity, the saturation, maybe tweak the colors a little bit just to get some slightly more interesting shadows. Like shading is not just add black often. If you look at how the Impressionists did it, it's always like a shadow of something, like orange is going to be purple. So it's always the opposite tone in there. So that's always a kind of a good thing to remember. But I just do that, and then I come in with my lasso tool and pop all those kind of shading back in. And because that's on a adjustment layer and it's on its own mask, it just means I've got heaps of control over how all this is going to work.
Cool. Just a quick little thank you for that, like tutorial within a tutorial. I really like that. It's interesting, the halftone, the first one you showed me of like flashbacks to trying to figure out Photoshop by myself, and like probably 15 years ago now. And I think it's existed for a long time. And then obviously like creating your own stuff, like you only have to do it once, right? And then you have it, and then you can get familiar with it, and you might run into a situation where, oh, I haven't made this one's not, it doesn't go to the scale that I want. It's like, okay, I'll make another one. And then you've got your library kind of set up there. And then, the brushes, I don't know if were they Kyle T. Webster brushes or were they True Grit? I know the True Grit ones you need to pay for, and then the Kyle ones are, I think they're always just part. You just need to go download them and check them out.
Yeah, if you have a Creative Cloud subscription.
Yeah.
They come free, so you just go and download them, and they double click, I think, and it just installs them. So it's pretty easy.
So easy to install brushes these days.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's just, again, it's like that thing of like, it might not be necessarily the way that works for you even. So it's not necessarily trying to say like, oh, this is the way you should do it forever from now on. But it's always nice to kind of see different ways of doing the same thing and how people have been doing it for a while, because it gives you kind of a hint of, or a clue into, okay, I'd never even thought about using the pattern tool, and I never have in the past, and now all of a sudden it's completely changed the way that I work, where otherwise I would have gone into Illustrator, create the thing, bring it into Photoshop as a flat thing, and then if I wanted to edit it, I need to go back into Illustrator and place it back in. There's a lot of kind of back and forth there that might not be super necessary. So seeing something like that really just kind of like blew my mind and has made my specific workflow a lot easier to manage.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just a comment in chat as well, really good point. Kyle T. Webster, whose brushes we've been talking about and many people use, has I think it's a weekly show here on Behance called Brush Hour, like Rush Hour. And he goes into far more detail. Obviously, he created, like, he's the brush guy. So if that's
He is
something
the
you want to go
brush
deeper into and check out and learn more, check that out for sure.
Yep.
And he does make it look easy. Yeah. Like Jeremy, like watching Carl, you know, use like drawing and illustrating. They definitely make it look easy. Not always as easy for us because we haven't spent our whole lives doing it. So don't be discouraged, but we can learn so much from everyone. So yeah, definitely check it out if you want to go deeper into the brushes.
It's also, I think, one of the things that is really valuable with those Carl T. Webster kind of tutorials is he goes into the basics of the brushes, of like the technical side of things, which might sound like incredibly nerdy and dry, but like one of the things that he explains really well, for instance, is that a brush works like a stamp. It's just a collection of stamps, one after the other. And if you understand exactly what that means and how that works, it will mean the world of difference to understanding why a brush is doing the thing that it's doing. And if you're going to go and create your own brushes, understanding that it is just a sample, it's just a stamp that it's repeating again and again, just changes your whole like outlook on how to create brushes. So there's definitely value in those things of like, you know, looking at the basics and the nitty gritty of like, it's like particle physics for Photoshop, understanding how the world of Photoshop is built and how those atoms react and respond to stuff.
Yep, totally.
Because then you can also trick it to do things that it's not necessarily built to do as well, which is one of my favorite things to kind of work with in Photoshop or Illustrator or anything else, is like hack the program to get it to do something that like, that's not what that was intended for, but I'm going to use it for this. There's something really kind of nice about that, about kind of, you know, tricking the program into doing what you want it to do despite itself.
Totally. I mean, that's like in Photoshop's DNA, like originally created for photo editing, and, you know, fast forward now and it's just, there's so much under the hood. There's so many different things you can do. Like we'll do a Photoshop session and, you know, so different with a photographer or, you know, illustrators and artists like use it in different ways, and lots to do. That's cool. Yeah. So Johanna's just shared a link in there, by the way, just in chat. If you want to check out the Carl T. Webster streams, they're super awesome. Festus is confirming, yes, they are weekly. They're a bit early for us. I have to watch them on replay when I can get the time. But yeah, that's cool. Hey, we've got like 20 minutes left.
Yep.
Just letting you know.
So I'm just putting in the shading now, putting in some kind of final steps. Again, all this shading is also kind of live, so I can edit it a little bit later on. Like, so for instance, I'm not super pleased with this kind of like baby vomit kind of green color, so I might just boost some of the blues in there and get a bit more of a interesting lighting. Something else that I can kind of do as well is, because I've got my base here and it's looking a little bit flat, there's maybe some things missing, is I might do a I might add a layer, and this is kind of similar to the locking layer, but it's on a different layer. So you saw me doing this where I've added a layer and I'm holding down the Option or Alt key and just hovering in between the layers and get this little weird icon. That makes that layer kind of a mask to this one. So for instance, now if I want to come in and paint, I'm going to put on give him some stripes, so like a stripy pattern. Because I've got my base layer here, if I draw there, or if I like make a selection across the whole thing, it will only fill where it sees information on the layer underneath it.
This is very cool technique.
So that's a really cool way of like getting quick effects to a layer without having to redo all your selections and everything else. And because it's on a separate layer, it means that it's also editable later on. So there's definitely advantages to all that.
Yeah.
So we'll just smash some things out. I'll come back to this afterwards before I submit it and kind of edit it up and clean it all up and add some detail. But what I wanted to kind of show as well is how to get the sense of it kind of blending in a little bit with the environment and adding some shading into there. So I'll show you guys that right now. doing this just really, really roughly. This just gives it a little bit more kind of impact and a little bit more interest. Makes it kind of come alive a little bit more.
Like it. So just before we move on, so yeah, Nicola was saying I can totally see your work as a Nintendo Switch case, which I totally agree.
I would love that. Right? Like that's one of my like dream clients to work with would be like Nintendo, any of this, and he's like, yeah, absolutely awesome. To be able to do something like that. So yeah. That's if anybody knows anybody in Nintendo, give us a shout. Cool. So now we've kind of done the bulk of the colors here. There's probably still some more details that we can throw in there, but there's always more detail that we can throw in there, but trying to get this kind of blended into this. So you can see this now. I've turned that kind of transparency layer off that's showing me my artwork, and now that's looking something that I think is quite cool. It's blending in nicely, but we're trying to get this to be a little bit more blended into this layer. So I'm going to go behind everything, add a new layer. I'll call this one Shadows. And there's a bunch of different ways I can do this, right? So because I'm behind my layer here, and I'm only sitting in front of my background layer, so this image of the train, again, it doesn't matter where I go in the selection over here. It won't make any difference. As long as I am pretty clean over here, then I'll be right. So I'm just going to go in and select something like this quite loosely. And then I'm going to go into, again, I don't want a black. I want like a darkish blue here. Because again, like, yeah, adding black to something is rarely the way to go with shading. Especially if you're using yellow, adding black to yellow just makes it this like horrible kind of slimy green color.
Right.
It's no good at all. So I'm going to go to my gradient tool, and I'm going to make sure that I am in my basics, and I've got my foreground to transparent color sorted. And then I'm actually going to go to the radial one. The radial one gives me a bit more control over what I'm doing, and then I can start putting in a bit of a gradient behind this and see what happens. Not loving that right now, so this is going to be definitely a bit of trial and error for me in terms of trying to get that looking the way that I want it to. So I could do it like this. Another way to do it would be to take that selection and use the burn tool, increase that size a little bit, and come in and I'd have to do that on a different image. So I'm gonna duplicate that because I'm gonna need pixels to do it too. So this is a bit of a destructive way to do it. So maybe not the best way, but can work a little bit. So the burn tool is just going to give me that kind of shadow there. So that's actually working a little bit better than my original gradient one. The only problem is if I want to undo it, if I want to drop the opacity, I can't really do that insofar as I've got the image there. So because it's a duplicate, it will allow me to do that a little bit. But yeah, that's one of the ways that I could do it. If I'm going full kind of cartoon style, I might also just do something like this, and this is going to require a little bit of like 3D thinking, if you will. So I might just do like a selection like this, select that down here, and just try and get almost like the volume of that kind of train with the kind of the tongue coming out, and then go over here, and then it doesn't really matter what I'm doing behind there, and then just fill that with a black and drop the opacity again. So that's going to give me a bit more of like a cell shaded style. It's a little bit more comic booky.
Yeah.
So again, depending on what I'm trying to do and what the kind of the vibe is that I'm trying to get to with something like this, may be more or less effective. But I'm actually kind of feeling this one a little bit more right now, and kind of seeing how that.
This is the burn tool.
Yeah, this
option.
Is the burn tool option where I've had to duplicate that layer so that I've got actually something to burn onto. Otherwise, it won't do anything, as you guys probably saw before. So yeah.
Cool.
And now that just kind of looks a little bit more embedded into the image. It's got a little bit more volume going. And then finally, I need to do the little speed lines in here.
Oh yeah, nice. Well, we're getting towards the end of our
Little
stream, ladies and gentlemen. So if you do have any extra questions, I see 1 or 2 in there, so I'll get to those in a sec. So now's the time to throw them in, because we'll be wrapping up soon.
So here I might kind of, do this thing where I can, sorry, I'm having a bit of an issue. I could do this with the shift tool and just hold it so that it's perfectly straight lines. I could do something like that, but it's not like, it might take a little bit of time, and often what will happen is I'll get a connecting line between the two. So I'm not going to be too fussy here, and I'm just going to try and do them by hand and just getting them straight. I put this on an angle because it's a slightly more comfortable angle to work with.
Yeah, I was about to ask you that.
Trying to get those straight lines. So rather than trying to do that kind of horizontal straight line, it's a bit of an uncomfortable kind of angle to work on. So always trying to sort of fix that. It's always this thing as well with curves like that. Those people who work with calligraphy and typography will probably be familiar with this idea that it's easier to pull a line than to push a line.
I was about to ask that too. Yeah, is it pulling or pushing? So it's easier to pull.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you want to pull the line from the point that it's going. So if you're going from here to here, you want to start and pull the starting point away. Right. Same thing, if you're going from here to here, you want to take the thing and push it and pull it away from there. You don't want to push to the point that you're getting to.
Yeah.
That's never a good idea to like push along it. It's one of those things with calligraphers they used to do where the pen, if you did that, would just dig into the paper anyways, and so it wouldn't work.
So it's like 101 calligraphy, kind of don't do this.
Yeah, but it's also it's just much more of a comfortable way to get a nice clean line is to pull the line rather than to push it. I don't know if that makes necessarily heaps of sense to everybody in terms of like when am I pulling the line, when am I pushing the line?
Yeah.
But that's the way to go, yeah.
Are there cases where you want to push the line, or is it basically you just want to avoid it at all costs?
Not for me, no.
Yeah.
No.
And that's traditional and digital.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even probably more so traditional than digital, simply because you've got the grain of the paper to contend with. So if you it's like if you're drawing with a pencil, right? You the pencil angle you'll drag it along. You won't push it in, because if you do that, you'll just push it into the paper and it'll go through. So yeah, definitely something to do with digital a lot as well. But nice. Something to kind of to consider and think about for sure. Cool. So we're about done. I haven't put my text in there. I will put that in a little bit later. But now just can add some little kind of bits and pieces here to like give this a little bit of zing, bit of pop.
Making it pop. What every client wants.
Yeah, exactly. Edginess and poppiness.
While you're adding the pop, because I think you can do it while you answer a question, I'm going to ask a question. And it was, how long would you say it takes to finish one full design? Like hours in total divided by how many days? Like, and Zaid also says, like, I realize it's relative, but sort of ballpark, or if you could talk a little bit about kind of time commitment to projects and things like that.
Yep. So yeah, it is absolutely relative, and it depends on the level of detail that you're going to put into something or not. Usually, if it's a client job, you usually got generally the time frame that seems to be the go for clients is about like a month, but that's with changes and back and forth, and they've got to send it to their stakeholders. So it's not necessarily a time like you working on the thing like at your computer on Photoshop or Illustrator for a month. Usually it takes me, if it's a personal project, I'll make more changes and make decisions because I'm not so like strict with the brief to myself.
Yeah.
Which can be a bad thing for sure. So if it's that, then probably like a few days for me of working on something. If it's a client brief and there's a clear cut brief that I need to work to, then that cuts it down significantly to a few less days. I don't know if that's super helpful. It's always a tricky one to answer, this one, because it is absolutely just depends on what it is that you're doing and how clear you are with your idea when you start.
Right.
As well, I think that can be a huge factor to how fast you're going to work or not. So yeah, I'd say if you're on something like this, for instance, like we've knocked this out in 2 hours, I'll probably spend another couple of hours on this, not necessarily doing much more, but just trying stuff out and seeing how it goes.
Right.
So you got to kind of factor that in as well, especially on personal briefs where there isn't that much of a clear-cut brief. You got to factor in like, hey, let me try this and see how that looks, and it doesn't work. So it's not like wasted, but you haven't kind of done anything to the illustration. So that's definitely like time that you got to factor in, but it's not time that is helping you kind of finish the work in that sense. So that is definitely something to consider as well. But yeah, if you're spending too much time, or if you're catching yourself going like, how about this or how about that, and that's when you know you're going in circles. Like that's when you know that you're not like, so for instance here for me, one of the big vices that I will do is I'll now pop a hue saturation layer on this and change all the colors and be like, hey, that's kind of cool. Yeah. I like that too. What if it was this, but the tongue was still the same color?
Like, and then you look at the clock and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. You're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, and like you haven't actually done anything really to this illustration. You've just kind of like messed it around a little bit. Sometimes this is really valuable in showing me color schemes that I hadn't thought of previously, but it's also a very dangerous, it's a very slippery slope to go down and just like go like, okay, cool. What if it was this? And you know what, I'm going to put a gradient mask on this. And so then this train can be like fading from one color to the other. Wow, that's super cool. Let me do that. And then I'll try and like save 17 different versions of the same thing. That's not great, right? That you're not helping yourself. You're not actually producing anything. You're just going around in circles and chasing your own tail and trying a whole bunch of different things. So again, there's no real sort of set time frame for these works unless you're working with a client and then there is a set time frame for a piece. But yeah, if you find yourself just kind of going around in circles and not working and not creating anything new and not like, you know, trying too many things and it's not working and messing around with settings and making minor tweaks like what I've just done, that's not a great spot to be in.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question super well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously it's good to talk around the question because there's no real answer to it. And of course, it makes a lot of sense to me anyway, like the difference between like a personal project is a good opportunity to experiment and you might find yourself spending more time that you don't really have to. If you had, I mean, this is done, right? Like you can be done now. But you might want to say, oh, I might spend a little bit more time like playing around with this or try something else out. Whereas of course, when you're working with a client, like you're charging you might be charging by the hour, hopefully not, hopefully you're charging by project or by the day. Something I learned the hard way, charge by hour. You know, you might need to be a little bit more strict because you know, and also like trying to teach yourself and learn how long does it actually take me to, you know, to get this out so that you know how much to quote next time as well is like a really good habit to get into. Trying to be really strict with, you know, you don't have to like time yourself, but practice in a professional sense. Like I'm going to sit down, I'm going to dedicate 2 lots of 3 hours to this project and see how you go. Because you might find that you're underquoting. You might find, I'm spending more time on this project than I thought. And now I'm behind. And then, you know, that's how you can get into a bit of a burnout mode and maybe need to charge more or find more efficient ways to work. So yeah, depends on lots of different factors.
It's a good point actually that you raised just quickly. I would actually quite recommend if you're starting out to time yourself, keep track of how long it takes you to do a thing. Because when a client gives you a timeline, it'll tell you A, whether you can do it, and B, whether, you know, how much to charge for it. So I think if you're not sure, if you're just starting out, knowing whether you work relatively fast or relatively slow, both are fine. There's no problems working. If you find that you're slow, it's not like, I'm a failure, I need to stop right now before I, you know, do some damage. But it just means that you need to factor that into your workflow. And like, I know that it takes me some time, so I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Like it. Very cool.
So again, yeah, see, like I've just changed the color of the eyes and just kind of playing around with that, seeing what's working, kind of like that. And yeah, that's a slippery slope for me as well. Of just like, this one's done, man. Just stop.
Let it go.
It's cool. It's finished. Yeah, let it go. Let it go.
Especially with something so subjective with color, isn't it? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
That's cool, man. This looks awesome. Can we look at it full screen, and we'll kind of, I mean, we've been looking at it, but yeah, there we go. And zoomies, super cool.
Nice.
I love it. I'm just going to just show you again, just real quick, the page where you guys can enter. Check that out. This is like starting from this canvas. It looks nothing like it now. You can have a go there. There are tons of like amazing prizes that you guys can win. Definitely check it out. You can check out, like, obviously if you didn't catch the whole stream, you can watch this. It'll be available on replay a second we go offline. And if you want some more inspiration, check out Jappy's from last week. That's a 2-parter. So you can check that out, get some inspiration. Check out the hashtag as well. Hashtag your world, your canvas. Remember that off the top of my head. But Jeremy, as always, man, it's great hanging out with you. I always really appreciate how much detail you go in and how much time you spend like explaining what you're doing. And I forget, even though we've done lots of streams together, I'm like, oh yeah, how do you do that? Like layer adjustment. So people probably have better memories than me, but I really appreciate it at the very least. And there's, yeah, lots of comments through chat as well about your amazing work, and thanking you for explaining it in such detail. And thanks for the mini tutorial in there as well. That was super cool. That's like Inception. I love it.
I'll do a proper YouTube video on my YouTube channel on how to do that if you guys kind of missed it or whatever. So make sure you guys check it out. But yeah, no, absolutely. Like always super cool to hang out. Always great to answer all the questions and get all the comments. So yeah, no, it's absolute pleasure as always.
Nice one. Well, we'll see you next time on Adobe Live. And yeah, make sure you check out Jeremy's YouTube channel as well. He's got some great tutorials in there. It's just him showing you how to do some of this stuff. So if you learn anything today, you're going to learn tons over there as well. We'll leave a link to that in the episode description. Enter the competition, and we'll see you guys next week. See you, Jeremy.
Thanks, guys.